Hi, I'm Carl Conrad and welcome to Australian Immigration News, proudly brought to you by Australian Immigration Law Services right here in Sydney. This week not much is happening in relation to law changes, but there was the new labour agreement for police officers looking for employment in Australia, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Our special guest tonight is Phil Honeywood, the Chief Executive Officer of the International Education Association of Australia. The IEAA represents all the major universities here. We're going to discuss how the migration review plans within the department are progressing, how the 485 extension courses list came about and its implications. And next week we're going to continue the interview and cover how universities are adversely affected by the new aged care labour agreement and the future of the current GTE, soon to be replaced by the genuine student test. Some very interesting revelations there. Phil, thanks so much for joining the channel tonight and sharing your thought. You've been around in the education industry just as long as I've been in the migration industry, and perhaps even longer. First up, let's talk about how the government is going with the extensive migration review, for as we know, a man in your position is always in discussion with the Home Affairs and Immigration Department. What is your sense of when we are going to hear something?
Well, I met this morning with one of Minister Clare O'Neill's advisors to discuss a range of issues associated with the current migration review. They're looking now to probably a late September, early October announcement of the migration review. It is Minister Clare O'Neill's number one priority. And in terms of crystal ball gazing, I guess what we have to also factor in is that the appetite of any government, particularly in a situation of accommodation, high rents and concerns about a social licence to operate with the wider community, the extent to which there's going to be a tolerance for cumulative growth of 10% plus in international student numbers year on year. Now, we're still not at pre-COVID enrolment levels because effectively our sector missed out on a 2-year pipeline when the borders were closed and UK, Canada took market share off us. But it's not going to be too long before we'll get to pre-COVID international student enrolment levels. And who would have thought that accommodation would have been the issue that it is now? So we understand the government might want to temper growth, but we just want to work with them to make sure that there's a sensible outcome.
Yes, we would all love a fair and balanced review outcome. Now, the Minister has indicated that she wants to simplify the system, to stream down the spaghetti subclass visa system, as she called it. However, that would take an enormous amount of work to write all the new laws and make new subclasses. So when do you think they're going to be ready with that?
Well, the question is, do they have to make any new visa? I mean, the subclasses exist. My understanding is that they want to find the easiest pathway possible, whether it be through English language level changes, which we would argue should be at the back end, not the front end, whether it be through other regulatory mechanisms that don't necessarily require them to dump subclass visa categories.
Well, that would be a relief if most of the major visa categories remained in the familiar format. Thanks for those insights, Phil. Now, moving on to the 485 visa extension and the list of courses released on the 1st of July. How did this whole idea about giving an extra 2 years for the 485 visa come about in the first place?
So originally, Minister Jason Clare, the Education Minister, raised with the 11 expert members of the National Council for International Education at a meeting we had in Sydney with him about 2 weeks prior to the Jobs and Skills Summit late last year. And he was asking for genuine ideas that he might take forward as Education Minister to the summit. And one of the ideas that was put forward was, well, if you're serious about providing migration outcomes to jobs in demand, skills in demand, then it would be a good idea to extend the period for the 485 subclass post-study work right visa for the type of skills that you're wanting. So my understanding is that he took that to the Jobs and Skills Summit, that he was given the green light to proceed on that basis. And then he, together with Minister Clare O'Neill, the Home Affairs Minister, he put together a 5-person working group, of which I was a member, to make recommendations on which qualifications should be applicable to a 2-year extension.
So in February, we got this list of eligible occupations and courses, which was fairly broad, and we were told we had to wait for the specifics. Now the list of CRICOS courses is out there, all 3,264 of them. How were these courses actually selected?
We had a number of meetings and briefings from key people associated with the Department of Employment, and particularly from Professor Peter House, the former Vice-Chancellor of Victoria University of Technology, who is the interim CEO of the new Jobs and Skills Australia entity. And together with his key civil servants, they went through the type of skills that they were predicting through all the data they had available to them would be required going forward, particularly in the context, Carl, of not enough young Australians coming through and doing STEM post-secondary programs and the need to supplement the declining number of young Australians coming and doing those courses with overseas skills.
When that list of eligible occupations was out in February, there was a great deal of anticipation for international students in Australia that if I'm studying in this area, I'll get the extension. However, when the list came out, that was not really the case we found for everyone. Many of our viewers have written in to complain.
The translation was never going to be easy, and basically our working group could only recommend qualifications. It had to be left to the Department of Education experts to go through every CRICOS provider that might have courses related to those qualifications and map the units of study to the relevant career outcome or skill in demand. Now, I've also made representations to the Department of Education subsequent to the list being provided on their website on behalf of some of my institution members, and they've told me that they'll look at them on a provider or course-by-course basis. However, I think their preference would be to wait another 12 months and do it on an annual review basis, and I guess what I'm trying to lobby them is really to try and provide some additional resources to look at the case-by-case basis now rather than 12 months down the line, because we already know that a number of providers are going to be worried about enrolment profile if potential students don't see their course as being applicable for 2-year post-study work.
Now that students can choose one of these courses on the list to get the extra 2 years on their graduate visa and study in Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane, how do you think the regional universities will be affected? In the past, to get those extra years on the 485 visas, students went to those regional areas to live and study.
Some of the feedback I've had from both public and independent providers as well, there's not so much of an incentive now because the type of courses that we've added the 2 years duration to for the 485 subclass visa will attract students often in the big capital cities of Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, where those IT, education, allied health jobs are often located. So what do we need to do to try and get international students incentivised to really look at regional Australia as an alternative? And time will tell how that pans out.
We thank Phil for his insights through the many years of experience in the sector. Next week, we will air the second part of this interview where we discuss how students are leaving the higher education sector in droves to begin Certificate 3 in aged care courses in their search for a quicker pathway to permanent residency. Also, we talk about how the GTE will be dumped soon and replaced with the GST. And finally, the department has conceded some crucial reality checks. For those of you out there who need professional advice and guidance, then remember we are always here to help. Book a time on our website or just pick up that phone. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you won't miss an episode. As always, take care out there and I'll see you next time. So bye for now.